David Linden.
Thank you very much, Mrs Moonen. Can I say what a pleasure it is to serve under your chairmanship this morning? I want to start by commending very warmly the Honourable Lady from Chichester for opening the debate. I think the experience that she spoke about, her own kind of personal background, was actually very inspiring. And I hadn't actually planned to, but I want to talk about my own kind of career path. I'm very proud to be a Cranhill boy that was elected to the House of Commons, and I'm pretty unusual insofar as I didn't go to university, I didn't study politics, I left school at 16. The Honourable Gentleman from Oakland, South Perthshire, talks about growing up in a council estate, as I did. And so I'm incredibly proud of that. But I actually, growing up, was brought up by a single parent, and the idea of going to university was just, that wasn't something that people from our family did. The only person in my family who's ever been to university is my wife. She's the first Linden to graduate. But when I was growing up, I always had this idea that I would go and be a police officer. And I went and I took my standard entrance test exams and got full marks in English, full marks in maths, and I failed by half a point in the information handling aspect. So to make my Member of Parliament was perhaps a bad idea. But I remember, because I was quite stubborn, deciding that I would leave school at 16, and went ahead and did that and decided to undertake an apprenticeship. And so I undertook an apprenticeship with Glasgow City Council. And you won't often find me paying tribute to the Labour Party, but it was actually under the leadership of Stephen Purcell, the Glasgow City Council Labour leader, who made quite a bold commitment that we would have apprenticeships that would pay a proper living wage, and that's something that I do want to come back to in the course of my remarks. So I undertook my apprenticeship and fell into the job of working for a politician, and it's a bit like kind of quicksand. The more you fight it, the kind of deeper you get, hence why I'm now a Member of Parliament. But I do want to speak. I mean, every time that I take part in a debate in Westminster Hall, as you'd expect from an SNP MP, and when our friends from the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party come and decide that they're going to have a go at the Scottish Government, it's kind of incumbent upon us to defend the record of the Scottish Government. And I've not been shy in the past in this House in criticising where the Scottish Government has done things that I think they could do more. So we take, for example, the International Men's Day debate about male suicide rates. We look at some of other debates that we've taken part in as well. But I'm afraid on this matter, I do think that the Scottish Government's been given a bit of a bad press from the Honourable Gentleman from Oakland, South Perthshire, and the Honourable Gentleman from Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock. It was actually the first government in Europe that appointed a youth employment minister. I don't know if that was just missed out deliberately in their speeches, but I think the work that's been done in terms of reducing youth unemployment has been pretty significant. My honourable friend from Paisley, Renfrewshire South, outlined that. Very grateful. It's more than happy to give way.
I hope he appreciated in my speech I did actually pay tribute to some of the work of the Scottish Government, especially on some of the recruitment for smaller employers. I think if you want to put it somewhere where we were critical, is the performance on education, where there are fewer students from deprived backgrounds going on to higher education than any other part of the UK, which is a fact.
That issue of education, because I think that's quite important. But I want to touch on this issue of apprenticeships, because I'm very, very proud of the fact that the SNP Scottish Government has delivered and is delivering 30,000 apprenticeships each year. I'm a product of that. I should probably declare an interest in that. But I do want to pay tribute to that. However, there is a point here that we must be paying people who are doing an apprenticeship a proper real living wage. And I was very, very disappointed during the course of the budget last week, when we saw the national minimum wage for apprentices going from £3.50, which is pretty pitiful in itself, to £3.70. Now, I appreciate that not every company will pay that basic rate, but it is pretty disgraceful that we're saying that. There have been things said today about the national living wage. I'm afraid that the national living wage that the UK government talks about is a contract, because it does not apply to under 25s. Now, if anybody wants to correct that, I'm more than happy to give way. But if we're genuinely serious about building a country that works for everyone, then that's got to be for under 25s as well. And so I very much hope that the Minister will feed that. More than happy to give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Does he think the levy should be used towards contributing to the wages of apprentices?
Well, not necessarily, because I think we need to be in a position where we understand that a fair day's work deserves a fair day's pay. So I'm not necessarily sure that we should be taking that from the levy. If we're serious about treating people equally, then we need to be doing that when it comes to pay rates as well. I want to pay tribute to one of the colleges in my own constituency. I'll come back to the issue of colleges in a moment, actually. But I think there was a point that was actually made by my honourable friend from Stirling about the fact that we need to recognise that there is a role for apprenticeships. I tend to take the view that if your pipes burst at home, you don't necessarily want a lawyer and an accountant, you want a plumber. And sometimes I think in governments of all different colours have been a bit too obsessed with this idea that we'll just churn out people with university degrees. And I think that the understanding that we need to have a diverse economy is very important. So that's why I'm very glad to commend Glasgow Kelvin College in my own constituency, who've been investing more in graduate level apprentices. And I think that's been very successful. I am conscious of time, Mrs Moon, and the constraints that we've got on us, but I do want to touch on the issue of colleges, because I know that was at a point that was raised by the honourable gentleman from Auckland South Ayrshire. I mean, the reality is that the SNP Scottish Government has stuck to its manifesto commitment of providing 160,000 college places. I very much welcome that. On the issue of the number of people that are going onto university from the private backgrounds, UCAS figures also show that despite a small decrease in the number of acceptances, in the 60% least deprived areas, the number of acceptances is still 3% higher than 2015, so I very much commend that. But I'm conscious of time, and I certainly didn't intend to speak for this long. But I do want to close by congratulating the honourable member for Chichester. I think it's been an excellent debate, and I hope that this won't be the end of the conversation on how we help youth employment.